everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Independent Thought. My name is Desmond Price. For today's episode, I am joined by my co-host Erica from the Cocktails and Capitalism podcast, and Matt Littrell. Matt, thank you for joining us on the show today. How are you doing? Erica, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. So excited to be here with you, Desmond. I always love collaborating with you. It's always a good time and we go deep and yeah, just really looking forward to it.
And how are you doing, Matt?
I am all right. Not too bad. As good as I can be in the current situation, and I'm glad to be here. It's a long anticipated episode.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. We've been talking about this one for quite some time now. Now, Matt, you are joining us today because we had been trying to organize your warehouse, the Amazon warehouse that you work at in the state of Kentucky. Can just to kind of lay the groundwork for everyone really quickly here, what were like the conditions like in the warehouse that led you up to wanting to organize your workplace?
Well, the conditions, the working conditions in specific, are things like it's too hot in the warehouse all the time, and not only that, but in some areas they never had fans. They would never put fans up, or they wouldn't put water coolers up, which is when people don't even have access to drinking water, they have to go quite far to go and get it actually. One of the main problems with that is now you're being penalized just for wanting to get drinking water.
Yeah.
You're and you're hot, you're sweating at the same time. You're gonna need that water. And then those were like initial and constant conditions. And not only that, but the fact that you're walking 20 miles or more per night, in just a shift, 10-hour shift.
Wow.
And that's only speaking as a picker. You have people that are even runners. So in addition to their job as a picker, a packer, or a stower, they will have to go and get items that are called priorities. Those items, they have to go out now. So they have to run. They have to run to get those items. They have to then bring them over to the pack loft, and then those items have to get out like as soon as possible. They run them around. They can select anybody can to do a job like that. They usually select pickers because you're closest to the items.
Yeah.
And another one of the conditions is that recently, and recently at my facility, as of July 17th, but at other Amazon facilities for a long time, you are not even allowed to have comfortable footwear while you are doing it.
What do you mean by comfortable footwear?
Amazon decided to institute a policy called the safety shoe policy. You have to wear approved steel or composite toe shoes, steel
Okay.
toe or composite toe shoes. And when you're walking so much, and that's not good for your feet.
No.
Actually, there's been so many studies done by actual chiropractors and other people who work on feet, but that they do more harm than good. There in a warehouse like mine, there was minuscule risk for an actual foot injury, and that is because of the fact that they don't do heavy items there. None of the inventory is heavy. It's mostly apparel. So like they're afraid you're going to drop a baby sock on your foot, and then you're going to need workers' compensation. Doesn't make a lot of sense. It seems like once you start to injure your feet, then your workers' compensation is going to need to go through. And you're going to need, they're going to have to pay it out more. It doesn't make any sense. It could make sense in a heavier fulfillment center where they tend to have a few more foot injuries, but not at SDF1 in Campbellsville.
I want to ask a quick follow-up question before, Erica asks her first question here. I had heard from other Amazon warehouses that Amazon has this policy that they refer to as like rate, where you have to pick so many items per hour. And if you don't hit that rate, then you then you actually get like penalized or like written up or something of that effect. Was that true also at your warehouse?
Yes, And it is like that at most warehouses, except in states where they literally cannot do that.
Okay. So only certain
Yeah.
like state governments have prevented Amazon from actually treating all workers that way.
Yes, and here's the thing about it that is even worse is the lack of transparency around your rates.
Mm.
Um, not only do you have rates, but at the same time that you are trying to keep up with the rates, you are also trying to balance your time off task.
Mm,
Anytime that you are not scanning, you are trying to limit that because and there's the obvious thing. They're judged as two different metrics, but if you have too much time off task, it lowers your rate quite a lot. If you have a low rate, you know, then you it's an unexcusable offense unless you have like an accommodation.
okay.
Mm.
So if they choose to write you up with rates, and I've been through this, you could tell them that you had to use the bathroom at this time. You could tell them that you take a little bit in the bathroom because you have a urinary issue where you can't really hold it. Amazon causes that in the first place by making you hold it so long.
Right.
But they don't excuse it. They will say something like this time has already been accounted for, meaning that they have a set amount of time that they think you should take anytime something occurs that would cause your productivity to be lowered. They call it the guardrail system. Like how a guardrail keeps you from going off the road,
Right.
right? So they want to keep you from getting off track and getting fired, is what they say the purpose of it is. Of course, we all know that to be a lie. But the lack of transparency, as I was alluding to earlier, is you don't even know what your rate is supposed to be at most places.
Mm,
And that is evidenced by the fact that, just to add concrete proof that this exists, there is the Warehouse Worker Protection Act. In New York, there's a version in California. And that is where that the company is required to notify you of your productive goal at any given time, and they're required to notify you when that changes. So at an Amazon facility like mine, the only metric you get to see is the average. And the rate, it fluctuates based on whether you are picking items that are going to go straight to the customer, or um, if you're picking items that are going to have to go to a different warehouse.
okay.
Hmm.
No, I appreciate you taking the time to explain that to us.
So they judge that in specific. You will get penalized if your productivity to goal and your percentage to goal is not meeting it for any of those certain patterns. And they change, they fluctuate at any given time because you're picking items and then your scanner will change you to a different path. You will start picking a load of different items that are going to a different destination. So you'll be picking customer orders for a minute, and then your tote will tell you that you've picked all the items that you needed, and your scanner will change over to another path, force you to log into a different tote, and then you have to pick those items for a different path. And your rate could go from as low as 70 units per hour to 120 units per hour within seconds. And then you have to work faster. And you don't know it. You do not know it. And then you don't get to see how you were doing with those items because you see your average.
It makes me think about how that Amazon app that was created for employees and management to communicate, where they like banned the word plantation and all these like slavery related words. Like if you're talking about pickers and rates and things, you could see why they wouldn't want to be associating their workplaces with plantations. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
It's a little bit. But unfortunately, that's not the only, I guess, what's the right word to use? It's not the only like instances that we've heard of them like abusing workers, there's also, having workers work in extreme heat conditions as well.
Hmm. And when we talk about the actual physical conditions, I like to make the differentiation between the physical conditions and the behavior of management. The behavior of management is much more of a choice, and management can always choose to have the workers' backs. They always have that choice, but they disregard it. So whenever somebody is affected by their conditions at Amazon, management shows a great deal of apathy.
Hmm.
They will refuse to address the situation and make a permanent change. Management likes burnout. They like it because they can send you off, fire you, and they know that because you're a desperate person, you will come back as soon as you're eligible. And you will come back for the same starting pay. So let's say you made it there for a year and you got like $1 raise. You got a 50-cent raise at your 6 months. You got another 50-cent raise at your 12 months. And then now they want to get rid of you. Why? Because they could just, fire you because you're burnout, you're not as profitable, and bring you back at a lower wage. And because, you're desperate, you're gonna start working fast again. You're gonna start working just as hard as you were and on day one.
Hmm.
Hire to fire, and you cannot have turnover that is 150% in the network without it being intentional.
Wow. Yeah. So the next question that we had for you was about something that we kind of already touched on. But the More Perfect Union reported back in August that Amazon warehouses in Tennessee had workers working in 145-degree temperatures. Was this also the case in your warehouse? And did you ever see any other safety concerns?
Well, in our warehouse, it did sometimes get that hot. It did sometimes get that hot because, like I said, there are areas that didn't have fans. But even where you actually have an HVAC, the temperature is controlled by corporate. It's controlled by headquarters in Seattle. They control your temperature range that you're allowed to have the air conditioned to. However, even when you're going to have that HVAC blowing, it might even be blowing out a little bit of somewhat cool air, right?
Yeah.
Well, those gains are going to be erased because the problem that everybody knew that was affecting it, the shipping dock doors being open,
Hmm.
all of that air just goes out the building. It doesn't stay in there. The fans don't get to circulate it around either. It
Hmm.
doesn't get to circulate around between the aisles that people are picking and stowing in. You have you have two aisles, and they have a bunch of cardboard and a bunch of apparel, plastic. That is an insulator. So
Hmm.
obviously there's not going to be any airflow between those aisles unless you have a fan blowing inside of it.
Hmm.
So the effect of that is people getting hot, burning up, and especially the older folks that are there, they can't deal with it. They cannot.
Yeah.
And there's so many articles from back in the day because this was one of the first warehouses where people would get drug out with heat stroke every day before they even had
Wow.
HVAC, before they had fans. People don't realize that the only reason we have any amount of fans or any water coolers or even HVAC is the fact that Amazonians United was around. And those workers, they held a lot of demonstrations, work stoppages, and strikes.
Yeah.
So did the workers in France, Spain, Italy, all over Europe where Amazon has to let them unionize.
Mm.
It's scary almost to think about the level of just discontent that it seems like Amazon has for its own employees. I mean, we heard about, the stories that you're talking about with rates and time off task and, like the heat inside the warehouses, them controlling it from across the country. And I also saw last December that, Breaking Points had covered a story about how a tornado ran through like eastern Missouri and southern Illinois, destroying a warehouse. And at the time, it was reported that some of those employees tried to leave, but Amazon threatened them, told them that they had to stay or else they were, might be in jeopardy of losing their job. Now, you were in a warehouse in Kentucky at a similar time. Did you also experience something similar around that time when the tornadoes were coming through in December in 2021?
Yes. At that time, Amazon put our lives at risk. Because, you know, the when this whole thing started and the tornado touched down in Taylor County, Kentucky,
Yeah.
that's near Campbellsville, that's the county that is in. People did not hear their PA system, the PA system that Amazon has that is supposed to warn you about the tornado, that is supposed to warn you about inclement weather, that you're supposed to shelter in place. And instead, people heard their phones, the brand, the emergency alert.
Yeah.
People heard their phones, and they didn't know where to go. They knew what was going on, but they didn't know where in the facility to go. And it's not as if there's a safe place in the facility in the first place. But because I was an associate that was trained with this, I knew where people were supposed to go. I knew where the evacuation points was. I was trained as what they call a GIMBA rep, which is in the lean manufacturing process. What GIMBA means is somebody who contributes to gradual improvement of processes and safety.
Okay.
You exist just to make Amazon look like they care. However, a lot of people think that you exist for something more because they don't actively participate in that role. But anyway, I had to lead employees from the fourth floor. I had to round them up. I had to use my emergency lights. I had it where it was flashing red. As in there's an emergency going on. And I led them down to what we call BC building. And that is where we have that's where the HR office is now located, where the safety office is located. Basically, it's just a desk that they have over there. I led these people over there and we sheltered in place. Everybody was in there and we started learning about what happened in Edwardsville just a couple hours before.
Yeah.
This was like 3 a.m. on December 10th. And when we were learning about this, of course, people saw how deadly that was and they saw that Amazon was apathetic. They wanted to go home. But if you would have pushed your way through safety and went home, pushed your way through security and went home, then you could have been fired for that. And I knew people who went home. And, the way they were penalized was their time was taken away from them. We had that incident where an Amazon employee that night, a driver, was fired and she had to go to Dave Clark. She had to go to Dave Clark to get her job back. That's one of the executives. He is now the CEO of Amazon Web Services division, I believe. He used to work at the Campbellsville site. Bezos was there. His wife was there. They were at the Campbellsville site and they neglected to even build up the infrastructure enough. The place that had arguably the greatest contribution to Amazon's success. They were willing to let those people die.
Yeah, I mean, it's an indictment, over and over again. I mean, like, I think we're seeing so much different just moments in time where Amazon just categorically does not care about their employees. And I think it's important to just keep like putting that like all these different instances out there, whether it's talking about, again, the heat or the tornado or, like how they treat people like in the warehouse, never giving them any time. The reports we've heard about people, having to, piss in bottles while they're Amazon drivers. I mean, it's unbelievable. And I think it kind of like leads into our next question that we have for you here, because honestly, the question really becomes like why work for this company, right?
Yeah, so
Amazon. Oh, sorry, Eric.
oh, no worries. I was just gonna he just kind of teed me up here. I was just gonna ask, so why is it that you're choosing to organize your workplace and stay? Why did you make that decision instead of finding another job?
Good question. Because finding another job, that is the easy way to do it. I tell people you have the choice between one capitalist that treats you like shit, doesn't pay you enough, and another one. That's the choice that you have. It's a very binary decision.
Yeah.
Or there's a third option. The third option is to organize a company as large as Amazon. When you do that, the effect is that unions set standards again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that's very well said. And I think that is a great segue into like the next part of our conversation. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about the unionization effort that you were trying to lead at your warehouse and the Amazon labor union. So everyone stay tuned. Welcome back
Moment of
from the break,
silence.
everyone. Thank you for sticking with us through this episode of Independent Thought. So before we went on the break, we were talking about some of the different just like instances of workers not having safe working conditions. And we somehow forgot to mention a couple different things. Erica, what were some of the things that came to your mind?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up the recent fires at different Amazon warehouses. I know that there were three. There was one at JFK 8, and there were two others. I think also in Albany, and I forget where the other warehouse was. But Amazon suspended over 50 workers for doing a work stoppage on this recent fire at the Amazon warehouse in Staten Island. And so that just it's just such a blatant example of when people are worried about their safety in an Amazon workplace and they try to speak out about that, they just get punished, instead of listen to their concerns addressed. It's just really despicable. And I was wondering, Matt, if you had any thoughts about this, or if you knew more about this that you want to share.
So it's tragic. A lot of people could have been hurt.
Mhm.
A lot of people could have been hurt again, and we saw Amazon's willingness to just let people suffer, to just make them suffer, go back into the workplace, despite all of their cries to go home. And there have been a lot more warehouse fires than just those three.
Yeah.
In Illinois, where they're organizing, Drew Dazinskas is one of the main organizers over there.
Yeah.
But at those Illinois warehouses like MDW2, MDW4, there have been fires
Mm.
that weren't as big of a deal because they didn't have union presence. Or at least, I shouldn't say they weren't as big of a deal. They just were underreported.
Okay.
And at these warehouses, Amazon does punish employees for speaking up too much. I have experienced this myself.
Mm.
They were limiting my participation in the safety committee. They were limiting my participation in the GIMBA process that I was explaining earlier
Mm-hmm.
because I spoke up too much for employees.
Okay.
And of course, I mean, that was even worse after my union activities. Once they found out about that, they started limiting my participation there. They stopped telling me when the meetings were.
Mm.
They
Yeah, and that's actually a great segue into what I wanted to ask you about next. You decided to try to organize your workplace, and in doing so, you chose the Amazon labor union. So the question I have for you is, how has that been since then? Like, how has your relationship been with Chris Smalls and the Amazon labor union and their support of you as you've been trying to organize your workplace?
I I joined the Amazon labor union. Well, our organizing committee joined the ALU because we thought that was what was going to resonate with Amazon workers the best. 100% Amazon worker-led union. Doesn't that sound really appealing? It sounds independent. It sounds like it's fighting the class struggle. It sounds like it's really going to work out. And then we realized that, we were courting other unions.
Hmm.
We were courting the machinists and aerospace workers. We were talking a lot with our local Teamsters. And Chris Smalls finally got into contact with us. My mentor was with us when we talked to Chris Smalls, and Connor, Connor Spence, the treasurer. They made us an offer that we couldn't refuse, of unconditional support.
Okay.
We couldn't refuse that offer, and it was better than the offers we had got when we were courting other unions. And we chose to go with the ALU. And then, unfortunately, after I got fired, we were organizing. We were getting authorization cards signed. We were distributing so much literature at our warehouse. We were winning hearts and minds. And then Amazon Labor Union did not have my back after that. They did not want to give us the resources that we needed to continue to operate. They knew I was going to have unemployment issues because Amazon has so much power. The employer has so much power in the unemployment process. They can dispute every single one of your claims and your payment requests.
Okay.
And they can drag it out. For me, they drug it out for more than a month. And I don't know how much they're going with it right now. So Chris Smalls in the ALU, only individuals within the ALU would help me out. But the people who actually had a following, who actually had the means to help me out, they could have shared my fundraiser on their website, my survival fund. I was living off those donations. And they did not, despite repeated cries to do it. And the person that is the lead organizer at Albany Fulfillment Center had my back on this because she was experiencing something similar. And they did not listen to her. And they knew that what this was going to culminate in was a loss in an ALU presence in Kentucky. Workers are not naive. I was naive because I was young, but they're not naive because they're going to see how people are treated. Actions speak louder than words.
Just for clarification's sake, what is it that you wish would have happened that did not happen?
I'm sorry you cut out.
Yeah, just for clarification's sake, what do you wish would have happened? What do you wish that the Amazon Labor Union would have done that they did not do?
I wish they would have had my back. I wish they would have supported me throughout this whole thing. And that means supporting me publicly, but also keeping with keeping with the support of our organizing committee as well. So continuing to coach myself and these individuals, be with us there through the whole process, tell us how can we continue to organize now that the main leader of this thing is on the outside.
Okay.
And actually deliver the t-shirts that they promised, deliver all of the signs and all that other good supplies that they promised. Support us. And we had a desire to do work stoppages after I was fired, and they really didn't want to get behind that. They gave me legal support in my unfair labor practices. However, that legal support coming from Seth Goldstein, as good as that sounds, the labor board is a resource that is provided to us for free. I can go and file these charges, and I have filed charges before against Amazon for their retaliation. It's free. The only one who pays is the employer when the labor board orders them to. So if this would result in me getting my job back, then great. And that only costs the employer something.
Mm.
That's not material support. That's like saying, we got your back, right? Well, pat on the back, keep chugging along.
Yeah, Erica, I think when it comes to the next question here, I think that Matt kind of already answered it in his
Yeah,
first answer
totally.
there. So is there another question that you might want to just ad lib in here, or should we just skip over?
Let me think. Yeah, I mean, I'm very curious about all of this. I know that the resources are spread very thin with the ALU. I know that they haven't, even though they won that initial election, they haven't won a union contract. So people aren't really getting paid for this work. So they're doing a ton of unpaid work and being pulled in 1,000 different directions, which I don't know. I think it would be hard to attend to all the different people, all the different warehouses and give them as much support as they need from that position. I can imagine that being a difficult thing. But yeah, I mean, was that legal support, was that at all financially helpful, or was it just, it sounded like it didn't help much at all?
It didn't help much at all. Like
Mhm.
Seth Goldstein and the students that are working with him, there's like
Mhm.
him and one other student. The only way they financially helped me was I think they donated $25 a piece to me
Hmm.
to help out, and yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Oh,
They
that's too
um
bad.
they didn't help share my fundraiser around, but like yeah, that's not the same as Chris Smalls doing that.
Yeah.
That's not the
Yeah.
same as the ALU saying, "Hey, we have your back here."
Yeah. Totally.
It wouldn't even make a public statement on it.
Hmm.
Right.
Mhm.
And while this is going on, you were saying that Amazon was coming in and trying to do different like union busting like tactics, like this is before that you actually, like left the company. Could you just talk to us briefly about what exactly that looks like? Because I've been hearing, from like SB Workers United about, Starbucks doing union busting. I hear More Perfect Union talking about union busting. As someone who experienced it, what does that look like as far as like Amazon is concerned? Like what did they come down and do after they realized that was happening?
Yeah, at Amazon. Okay, so this started happening to me in April. After the Amazon labor union's victory, Amazon started doing things. Initially, they started cracking down on security measures. So they started having security guards patrolling the areas where workers were toiling quite a bit more. Every 45 minutes, they had to check the bathrooms. And I had a security guard tell me they were looking for union materials and that they were going to remove them and that they're going to investigate, like to see who put them there and who knows about it. That's like the first crackdown. Now, whenever it started to affect me personally, the crackdown took the form of before I even got disciplined, they started coming after me with whisper campaigns. The type of whisper campaigns that are meant to disrupt your organizing committee, instill fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And that did start affect our organizing. They were saying things like, Matt is going to get fired, and Matt and all of his associates, everybody who's organizing with him or wants a union, they're going to get fired. And they were also saying things like, management is meeting about this daily.
Isn't that illegal?
Um,
Yeah.
Whisper campaigns are not illegal unless you can
Oh.
prove that management said it.
Oh, okay. Okay. But
So
firing
it is
people for
illegal if you get
organizing.
caught.
Yeah.
If you get
Yeah.
caught, and
Yeah.
here's another thing to add to that. Um, at this fulfillment center, it's a small town. You have favoritism.
Mm.
People know each other. You have people that have been there since the doors open, but they really haven't had any upward mobility in their jobs yet. They're close to management. They're close to management, and so that's how they know exactly what management wants them to say and give them plausible deniability. They pick their favorites, and they get the favorites to spread the whispers.
Mm.
And the
Creepy.
favorites will do this. If they've been there for 20 years, they're most likely very comfortable.
Yeah.
Because in a rural area where the cost of living is relatively lower than average, they are comfortable making $21 an hour. You know, they already bought their house. They already own their house. They just got to pay the property taxes.
Right.
So should I go on to the next question here? Okay. So Matt, I was wondering, is there a final message that you'd want to share with people about your personal story and your work trying to unionize Amazon?
Support all workers in their union struggles. You have to reach out for them. Get If you know something about unionizing or if you want to learn something, there are so many resources out there, like the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee. You have union locals. There's a union local in pretty much every area in the United States. Or there's a labor council. Or there's a Democratic Socialist of America. Or there's a Starbucks that's organizing. You can get in the same spaces as them. You can wear union apparel and wait for an employee to talk to you. They might if they're interested, right? That's a tactic that I've seen a lot. Get in the same online spaces as they are. All workplaces have some kind of fraternalizing, right? They all get together. Maybe it's a Facebook group. Maybe it's a Discord. Perhaps it's some local bar where they all go after work to go there, right? You get in those spaces, you talk to them, you tell them what's up, what you want to help them out with. You offer some mutual aid. Mutual aid, the purpose of mutual aid is because well, for one, it's having empathy with your fellow human beings and doing something for them. You feel good for doing it. They feel great for receiving it. It improves their conditions, and you make a material difference in their life. That's going to help you organize. Why? Because you can stand outside the warehouse and you can hand out flyers, or you can hand out food. You can hand out food and you can leave your contact information in there. Hand out food and talk to them quite a while. That's what works. That's what worked at Staten Island, where they were feeding employees all the time.
Speaking of which, this is the final question that I have for you. For those people who are listening right now and who might want to figure out like how they can like directly help out you in particular, how can listeners, help you out and your organization efforts as you continue to go forward with this?
Well, I am still having trouble getting unemployment. They have recently disputed my last claim. In the state of Kentucky, you have to be looking for work when you are getting unemployment. So you have to be submitting job applications. Then you have to tell them in your payment request where you applied to, who was the hiring manager, and all that stuff. Well, they sent me a letter today that said, we're rejecting your payment because you do not have adequate transportation to your job. The jobs I applied for are work from home jobs. This is how ridiculous it is. And this is going to cost me a lot of time in the appeals process to try and get it. So if you can spare something, I would love that. Or if you can just help me get the message out. Share this episode, share previous episodes, share articles that I'm featured in, interact with me on social media. I like to get to know people who like what I have to say. So you can DM me. You can talk to me on TikTok. You can email me. All that. I like that solidarity.
Absolutely. And where can people find you online if they want to reach out?
My Twitter handle is, I'm most active on Twitter. I don't like Instagram much. They don't want to let me post. But on Twitter, it's at Amazon Union of KY. And on TikTok, it's Amazon Union KY.
All right. And for those who are interested, those links will be in the episode description. Erica, thank you for co-hosting with me today. Where can people find you at online if they want to learn more about you and your podcast?
Oh yeah, of course. I'm the host of the Cocktails and Capitalism podcast. If folks want to listen to that would be great. We basically are a storytelling podcast that shines light on different aspects of our capitalist hellscape, and we pair every single story with a crafted cocktail. So we try to make it fun. We try to make it light. So yeah, please go find us, Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to podcasts. And then if you want to follow me on Instagram, I'm very active there at Cocktails and Capitalism, or on Twitter at Cocked Capitalism. It's kind of an awkward name.
All right, everyone. As before, those links will be in the episode description. So go ahead and just click into the episode description now, and you will see those links. Thank you to everyone who checked out this episode. Please, as Matt said earlier, please share the episode on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and we will see you in the next episode. So, Erica, thank you for joining on the podcast today. Really do appreciate that. In our special little epilogue here to our episode, this is like the first time that I actually had a co-host come on and do the podcast with me. A new experience. How did you enjoy being on Independent Thought for your first appearance?
Oh, thank you so much, Desmond. It was really, really fun. And yeah, I don't know, you definitely have a different approach to recording episodes than I do on my podcast, but I really like the way that you do this, and the way that you just kind of like, I don't know, you have things laid out and you just drive through it. You just go straight through it. And yeah, it's brilliant. It's amazing.
Yeah, well, I think I might have mentioned this on a previous episode, but I used to get so nervous doing podcasts in general, and I get a little nervous still, but like I used to get like
Yeah.
really nervous. And so like I was trying to figure out like how can I get through this to kind of like better manage my own anxiety. And for
Totally.
me, it was like, you know what, let me just be semi-organized to a degree. Like I don't want to have like a script because that just feels a little like less authentic, but I wanted to
Yeah.
like make sure I had all my bullet points in order and figuring out how I wanted to structure the episode. And so yeah, it's just a I guess the thing that really works for me. But I'm looking forward to having you
Mhm.
come back on the podcast in a few weeks for just you and I's like solo episode.
Oh,
So I
hell yeah.
appreciate that you're coming back on for a second round of Independent Thought.
Oh, totally. That one's going to be a really fun discussion. Yeah, and I don't know, I would love to do this more with you, just kind of co-hosting. It's an interesting way to have these deep conversations about important topics. Having your brain kind of diving into it and my brain as well. Like I think it's a
Right.
really good approach. But
Yeah,
yeah.
and I think particularly with this episode, your podcast is focused on talking about capitalism, and
Mhm.
specifically, like talking about why capitalism is destroying everything. Like that.
Uh-huh.
And so like when I first came across your podcast, like I think, I've talked to you about this like, privately, and then like on your show itself, like
Mhm.
I'm like in a headspace where I'm just like, yes, I recognize that capitalism is destroying everything, but I'm like wondering, like, can it be saved? I don't know. I'm kind of like, you're actually
Mhm.
like, I think talking to you more is kind of like putting me into like an existential crisis about it.
Oh, good.
So I'm sitting in a gray area right now. I'm just like, damn, maybe she's right. But in regards to Amazon, though, it
Mhm.
feels like, and I mentioned this before, like I talked about Amazon last year, and I talked about them,
Mhm.
like I think multiple times last year. Earlier this year as well, I had another guy come on, Joey DeSatnik. He was trying to organize an
Yeah.
Amazon warehouse in the Cleveland area. Now we're talking to Matt, and I'm just hearing these stories again and again and again, and it feels as though Amazon might just be the personification of capitalism as a whole, right? It just like the rate that they
Totally.
gobble everything up, the rate that they, expand and don't seem to care about like how many things are destroyed in the wake of their expansion, and how
Mhm.
they go out of their way to treat their employees as subhuman in certain regards. I mean, what are your thoughts on it?
Absolutely. I think you're totally right about that, in so many different ways. Like, first, Amazon is the biggest employer in America, so they are huge when it comes to capitalism, and America is the capitalist epicenter of the world. So, the biggest company in the biggest capitalist country, that's huge. In addition, they are also the kind of face of this new form of production that we're seeing under capitalism, where they have basically, they're swallowing up all these other industries, and then everything is being consolidated into these warehouses where people are being forced to work like they're being working in a plantation. They're trying to do things super fast. They don't get breaks. They having to pee in bottles, shit like that, So I think when you're talking about like where capitalism is heading right now, Amazon is where it's heading. It is what, our whole system of production, consumption, distribution is going to be looking like into the future more and more. So the fact that folks at Amazon are trying to unionize, and the fact that one of the warehouses succeeded in this is really monumental when you're talking about combating the exploitative forces of capitalism and these mega corporations that are swallowing everything else up, and making it so that other ways of living are now unsustainable, unattainable even.
Yeah, and I think for me, the reason why I kept coming back to it, I wasn't just focusing on it just from a lens of, we need to tie in how Amazon is, I guess, like a personification of capitalism. But rather, for me, with this podcast, I've always been asking myself this one repetitive question, which is, what can I talk about that's going to elevate a conversation, or that's going to have an impact for those who might listen? Like, I don't know if like 50 people are listening to an episode, 100, 1,000, I'm not sure how many people are going to listen, but like, how can I bring a productive and important conversation, and maybe like also give a perspective that might not be readily be coming through, like, I guess you would say, like commercial channels or your mainstream channels, so on and so forth. And when I think about Amazon, I remember going through last year, and when I first came across this, I think I actually was, it might have been on Last Week Tonight. John Oliver, I think, is and his team are severely underrated with some of the reporting that they do.
Good. So good.
And they were talking to Amazon workers in the San Bernardino Valley, over in California, and they were talking about how they would have to, make rate, which is why I brought that up in this episode. And they would have to pick like 300 things per hour. And to hit that mark, there was so many times where they felt like they had to run through the warehouse, but they also weren't allowed to run through the warehouse because
it's insane.
Right, because it was a safety violation. So if you got caught running through the warehouse, they would write you up. But at the same time, if you didn't make rate, they would write you up.
Yeah.
And it was just like, they had no idea what they were supposed to do, because Amazon, it was putting other businesses out around in their town. And like, they just, like, they felt like it was like the best option they had for work. But at a certain point, like, you couldn't continue to work for a company that just grinded you into dust. Like, it was almost like they were trying to get people to quit after a while.
Oh yeah. And they absolutely are. Like, the turnover rate that we were talking about in this episode, it is so massive. And I mean, it's by design that they are making their workplaces like unworkable, because they want people to be, there for a very short time so that they can't organize, get comfortable, get benefits, get like, the things that you need to make any kind of work life sustainable. They want to make it so that you're running across the warehouse and maybe going to get in trouble for that, and maybe going to get in trouble, if you don't run also, because then they have the power. They can choose exactly when they want to fire you. They can completely just cycle people in and out and make sure that no one will ever be able to, none of the workers will ever be able to build their power and be able to bargain with the people in charge. So
right. And I think looking at that fact, it led me to my next like logical conclusion in my head, because as I'm talking to people about different things going on, like last year we talked about lead in our water supply, talked about critical race theory on my podcast, talked about like New York City medallion taxi drivers and the problems they were going through over in the East, and just like going through like issue by issue by issue. I was always talking to people about like how we needed to all get more involved. But at the same time, it also becomes abundantly clear, especially through this Biden administration, that the voices of those who got this president elected are largely being ignored. And so how can you continue to say like, oh, well, just let's go back to these politicians and ask again, when all of our asking isn't really being met with anything whatsoever, other than just being told to just shut up and kind of just like sit down and take your turn, and maybe we'll get to you later, which has led me to talking more and more about unions. Because if politicians aren't going to step up and do what's necessary in order to fight back against these corporations who are willing to treat us just however they see fit, then there has to be some answer. The answer can't be nothing. And so my new focus has been talking about unions a lot, because if they won't protect us, we have to protect ourselves, right?
Yeah. They don't keep us safe, we keep us safe.
And that's kind of like where my head's been at right now. I think the Democratic Party, I never had a whole lot of faith in them, but I was hoping that after all the energy that was generated in 2020, through like months of protests, the pandemic, just like the huge mobilization that came out to get Biden elected, to get Trump out of office, I was hoping that some of that would turn into like real action, and it just really hasn't materialized. I know some people will give Biden credit for student loan debt, like 10 to 20,000 being forgiven, or like him having a strong stance against having a strong stance about codifying Roe v. Wade into law. But I just feel as though what's been happening so far is very minimal in comparison to what could be done, and it's not enough. It's not an appropriate response to the amount of different crises that we're facing as a nation right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Erica, I thank you for coming on the show today and taking the time to talk with me about all of this. For everyone who is interested, definitely go check out Erica's podcast, Cocktails and Capitalism. I've been on an episode, and I think awesome you should go listen to that episode and several other episodes. I mean, how many are you up to now?
Oh gosh, I don't even know. It's probably close to 70, 80 maybe. So third season,
Right. So if you have a job where you can listen to a podcast, this is the time. Go subscribe, Apple, Spotify, go check out her podcast, and also follow her on Instagram, where the posts are relentless and they are always of high quality.
Oh, thank you so much.
High quality.
You're so nice. And it's really an honor to just be working with you. I respect what you're doing so much, and your ability to fairly and intelligently frame so many different important discussions. So thanks for working with me. It's been an honor, and I can't wait to come back on your show.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Erica. I look forward to the next time that we have to do this, and hopefully we'll get to share some more posts on Instagram in the future.
Oh, yeah.
For everyone who checked out this episode, as I was saying at the end of the episode before the epilogue, definitely share this episode on social media, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, wherever you spend your time at, mostly. We will see everyone in the next episode.
Awesome. Cheers.